Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. DJ here, hands on SAP Dev with Q Macro. Thanks all so much for joining. It's lovely to see you all. Good morning, good afternoon, I suppose. Napheet. Good morning, Fritzau. Good morning, Mahesh. Or good afternoon, Mahesh. Good morning, Helmut. Good morning, Tim. Thank you all for joining. That's awesome. And all the other people as well. Please feel free to chat. Helas. Volker, good morning. Please, as Volker just did, please don't hold back on chatting in the chat there. You should see it there on the, which way am I pointing now? No, the other way, there, just down there. This is what they do on YouTube, isn't it? They point to things that are on the screen elsewhere. So just there is the chat, and that will be there all the time, of course. So, this is as much your channel as my channel, your hands on SAP Dev thing as mine. Guten Morgen aus Heidelberg. Servus, Gregor. Moin moin. Yes, exactly. Moin moin. What was I saying then? Yes. So thank you for joining. Feel free. Thank you to my recent followers as well. I think Umarvs and Ranikaza and Baiba as well. Baiba B. Baiba, I think I know which Baiba that is. If you're on the stream right now or watching a replay, welcome and thank you for following, and well done on the completion of the Code Jam exercise 10. That was a really nice message you sent there on Twitter. Good morning, Mark. Okay, sure. You're in the mothership today. I was in the mothership on Tuesday. So yeah, tag team. Just drinking my coffee that I've made in my nice espresso maker. Having also, in memory of my lovely time in Utrecht, was it there? Yes, I think it was. Or was it Mechelen? I can't remember. Anyway, no, Utrecht, of course. Stroopwafel, which is very nice. I had it on the top of the coffee, but it almost fell in, so I've taken it off. Anyway, let's get started. I've learned this lesson already, and I've not remembered. Don't put something in my mouth when I want to talk. Okay, today, what I would like to do with you is continue the deliberately slow and winding, and therefore hopefully interesting path to the some business services on SAP Cloud Platform. Just a reminder, one of the things we covered last week very briefly was from TechEd in Las Vegas, in Barcelona. Of course, we've got Bangalore coming up, but the messaging there was very clearly that SAP Cloud Platform is the business technology platform, right? I'm not going to go into the details of why it's called that. I think it's fairly straightforward and obvious why, because we can extend business services and use business services to extend and build new applications and so on. And so yeah, I mentioned the phrase business services, and these are the services with which we can do these extensions, build these new applications to sort of leverage, to use leverage as a verb, to leverage systems like S/4HANA Cloud and SuccessFactors and so on, to do really cool stuff. And I think a lot of us are at least familiar with some business services already. For example, workflow and business rules. Those are sort of the sibling that I like to call them in the orchestration category. And the reason why I'm saying the journey is going to be nice and slow and interesting and winding is because I want to start out where I actually literally am, and also where I think a lot of you will be as well, which is, having maybe dabbled in some of these business services already on the Neo environment, and move eventually and migrate, as it were, to the same services on Cloud Foundry. So that's what we're going to do. We started that journey very briefly last week by having a look at the overview of the business services for business rules on the API business. So we'll have a brief look at that again, but only very briefly to orientate ourselves. And what I want to do today is make some calls, figure out how to make a call to the business rules API, the runtime API, to invoke a business rule. Okay, so we'll have a look at the business rule that I've already got. It's one I created a while ago, and we'll figure out how to invoke it. But we'll do it in a really careful way. We'll break everything down. We'll look at CSRF tokens. We'll look at how the structure of the API URL namespace looks. We'll also look at, hopefully, there's a difference. I think we'd noticed last week that the runtime API has moved from version 1. There's a version 2 of the runtime API for business services. So we'll look at the difference as well, hopefully, if we get time. We'll start with V1 though, because I think, again, that's what a lot of people will be familiar with. So eventually, we're going to be running the same business rule, invoking the same business rules that we've created on Cloud Foundry. Eventually, I want to do this over a number of episodes. Before we start, got a couple of things I wanted to show you. One of the awesome things at TechEd was the ability for me to go and chat with the wonderful folks at OpenSAP. They sort of shared our space in the developer garage. They were there as a sort of another learning go-to. They are the learning go-to place. They were telling me about there was a course, the mobile SDK, the mobile development course has just finished, so it's obviously available now as a self-paced course. You can find it down here. Let me just open that in a new tab anyway. But one of the courses that's upcoming that I'm going to definitely subscribe to and start following, because it's, I don't know, it's just hit a real sweet spot with me, is the Introduction to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, SLES, okay, which is of course the flavor of Linux upon which SAP HANA runs. Good morning, Bombadil. You didn't miss much. We're just talking about what we're going to be doing over the next few episodes. In fact, I've got a very nice surprise for you for next week as well, which I'll remind me to tell you about next Wednesday. Remind me. You can't see my screen? What? Oh no! Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes. Let me switch. Thank you, Mr. Streifeneder. Thank you, Errol. That's awesome. Let me just switch to there and change screen. Of course, I'm getting so excited. Thank you, Max. So yeah, the OpenSAP, open.sap.com. If you've not been there before, let me know if on the chat. If you've already followed an OpenSAP course, whether that's followed the course live or followed self-pace, I'd be really interested to find out, who's been doing some OpenSAP courses. I've done quite a few in the past. There's an Introduction to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, which I'm very excited about because I did see, I've got my little bookmarks here, I did see a really fantastic blog post on the SAP community yesterday by Kim Versna Pen, build your home data center and install S4HANA. Now that really appealed to me, the whole idea of building some hardware again, just absolutely fantastic, and the scale of it is absolutely wonderful. The end result, have a look at this. In fact, I can paste that OpenSAP.com first of all, and I can paste the URL to this blog post. This tells the story of setting this server, which has 256 gig of memory, and what he installs on it, which is really nice, this is the fascinating part, is ESX, a hypervisor. Okay, absolutely fascinating. Sort of mainframe in a tiny box, effectively, and then of course he goes ahead and creates a VM upon which he installs SUSE Linux, and then of course subsequently HANA and S4. So yeah, absolutely spot on. OpenSAP is there up with where are we? Here we go. Up with the real relevance. So there. But there was the mobile one as well, right? So mobile. Where was it that's just finished? I can't really find it now. Where is the, I can't see my cursor. There was a really good Grasshoff. There we go. Build mobile applications with SAP Cloud Platform Mobile Services by Martin Grasshoff. That finished recently, and I was talking to the folks at TechEd, the wonderful folks behind OpenSAP, and they were telling me that the average rating we got was like in the 4.5, 4 point, whatever it was. People really happy with it, and I would recommend 1,200 records of achievement, 10,000. No, was it 10,000? 10,000 enrollments. Definitely recommend that course as a self-paced thing. I mean, I think I actually quite like self-paced because I can do it whenever I want. So yeah, definitely visit OpenSAP and check this course out, and check the other courses out as well. There we go. So let me just catch up. OpenSAP rocks. Yes, evolved web apps with SAP UI5. Yeah, that was a wonderful course. As was the first OpenSAP course on UI5. Volker. Leo. Say hi to Leo. Welcome, Leo. Mark, you can only see part of my browser window. Can anybody else only see? Well, what I'll do now is, I'll switch to another screen. You should be able to see pretty much, you should be able to see all of the VMware screenshot there, the blue screenshot. So let me know if you can't. Yeah, actually, I can see my... wait, no. What is going on? OBS is really playing. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Okay, so hold on a minute. Display capture. Now then. There we go. Let's try that. And let's go back. So hopefully that should be better. I'm going to switch back now and capture. There we go. I've no idea what's happening with OBS at the moment. It's doing really weird things since the upgrade to Catalina of macOS. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for letting me know. And thanks also Max before. So yeah, OpenSAP. Go there, do courses, learn cool stuff. And I think, Mark, you said all I know I got from OpenSAP. That's a wonderful thing to say. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Only the oh yes, of course. Only the header is not visible now. In fact, header banner group. I'll move that up. There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. What the heck is going on? The stream chat, move that as well. There we go. And display capture. I think now we're good. I think we're now good. See, when I've been talking to people about running these live streams, is the Bombadil and Napit, are we okay now in terms of? I think I can see the header in the chat now. But running these live streams, on top of the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing, is millions of plates to spin. So thank you for looking after me, and let's work together on this. Anyway, let me have a look. What else? I'll briefly mention. Don't forget, I've still left this open. If you want to submit an article for me to read out on Tech Aloud. Create an issue on this GitHub repo, Tech Aloud, and I can have a look at it, and then maybe if it's correct, then as in if it's readoutable, then I can read it out and it will appear on the podcast. So there we go. There's that, and finally, I think it's time to move to what we really want to talk about today. Ulf, thank you for following. Ulf 2019, welcome, by the way. Welcome. Okay, so I put a little bookmark here to talk about very briefly, where we want to get to. If we're going to start on a journey, we at least want to know, we're going to go over there. See that mountain over there, or that, that building. We're going to go that way. Okay. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm saying, right, I've got my SAP Cloud Platform cockpit open at my DJ's Cloud Foundry trial. You will have one as well, I'm sure. In my trial sub account, I've got my dev space, and I'm looking currently at the service marketplace within my dev space in my trial account, and I can see that in fact if I use the search here, I can see that I've got this business rules service that's available to me, and there's a service plan which is a Cloud Foundry thing in terms of the environment on the SAP Cloud Platform that allows me to play about with that. Okay. So eventually what I want to do is fire an instance of this business rule service up and use the light service plan and create some business rules and then invoke them via the API on Cloud Foundry. But at the moment, good morning Ulf and welcome. Thank you for following, by the way. But for the moment, where I am, and I think maybe where a lot of you will be, is in the is that where it is there? I'm just going to go there anyway. Is in Neo. Okay, so we're moving gradually from Neo to Cloud Foundry for lots of different reasons. It makes a lot of sense in my mind, and but I wanted to show you what we've got with Neo. I want to sort of take us around what we've got with the business rules, and therefore what we should expect when we move to Cloud Foundry, because effectively the business rule service in Cloud Foundry is pretty much the same as what we've got in Neo, and so we should be able to make that transition fairly easily. I've already set up the business rules. I'm not going to go through setting up the business rules on Neo because, of course, let's set it up together when we get there on Cloud Foundry. Instead, let's just have a quick look at the UI that you get when you set up business rules, with which you can maintain business rules projects. Okay, I just want to explore this a little bit, and then we'll look at the business rules APIs on SAP API Business Hub, and we'll figure out which ones we need to use to invoke a business rule, and we'll do that manually. Okay, it's 8:18. That's good. I've not rambled too much this morning. Anybody who was here last week said that I have the gift of the gab, as in I can talk a lot, and Tim very kindly reminded me of that yesterday, so thank you, Tim, for that. Not that I'm conscious of it now at all or anything. So yeah, okay, so by the way, let me know in the chat as well. I'm pointing here at the chat. Let me know in the chat if you've played around with business rules already, and if so, what have you found, and what the interesting parts are. I would love to know. But I've got here, and I want to explore the structure of these business rules and how things are made up briefly before we actually go and try and call it. Okay, Bombadil, you've used business rules a lot. Okay, that's awesome. Have you done it productively, or have you just been playing around, or let me know. Oh, John, good morning. So you haven't but have to today for work, so this has been perfectly timed. See, John, I'm there, so this is really cool. Yes, so business rules. So let's just dive in. And welcome, John, by the way. Let's just dive in. I'm going to choose this one, airline discounts, because it's simpler, but they're both very, very simple. Anyway, so almost productively. Is that a new state? Almost productive. I like that. Thank you, Bombadil, for sharing that. So a business rule is effectively the business rule service is a way of collecting together in a structured way, effectively configuration. In the representing sort of small pieces of business logic that you can keep separate from your application and give to your users. So that they have the ability to own it and modify as they see fit without you having to modify your application. So it's a really nice sort of extracted business logic in the form of normally decision tables. Okay, this reminds me of a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I was programming some insurance software on a PDP-11. Using a language called File Tab D, which was very similar in terms of it was a tabular decision table style programming approach. Very odd, but you know, I'm thinking about that now. Yeah, exactly. The business rules are really good to keep the workflow flexible. So that's why I always like to say that the business rules service is like the sibling, the brother or the sister of the workflow service, because you know you have this extra bit of formalized business logic that you can sort of keep and maintain separately to your workflow itself. Anyway, so what does a business rule look like? And we're just going to assume for now that, you know, I think I'm going to make this statistic up, but I think 90% of business rules are in the form of decision tables rather than these textual rules. But you know, what do I know? I'm just going to let's go through each of the tabs separately. So airline discounts. What I wanted to do is to create a business rule. So you for a given airline, Lufthansa, British Airways, American Airlines, you know, whatever, United. You know, you throw that in there as an input and you get a discount percentage out, so like 5%, 10% or whatever. Okay, so the simplest thing that could possibly work. Good morning, Leo, you're also in the mothership. Excellent. Hi Leo, hi Volker. What building are you in, by the way? Share which building in the mothership you're in. So it's airline discounts, and you create a number of artifacts within a business rules project, and one type of artifact is a so-called data object, okay? And a data object is often used as a structure to contain data that comes in the call, data which you supply, and of course there's another structure usually that the business rule service plonks the answer into and to pass it back to you. So here we've got a data object that I've called flight info, which is a structure, and if we have a look at that, we'll see that structure has a couple of things here to note. Well, in fact, there's only one thing here. There's one attribute, one field in this record. Let's use the word fields and records, structures and attributes. It's got an airline field, which is a string. Okay, so bear that in mind. So there is this airline discounts structure, this flight info structure in the airline discounts project. If we now go back and have a look at the discount info structure, I'll click on that. We're not going to explore all the different possibilities here. This discount info structure has a single attribute, discount, which is a numeric type. Okay. Oh, you're in building 21, right next to the coffee bar. Obviously, of course. What a silly question. I was in building, anyway, yes. I was in 21 for lunch on Tuesday, yes. So anyway, so we got the discount attribute inside of the discount info structure. Okay, so that's so far so good. So we got these records with fields that we're going to use somehow. Next, I'm going to jump to rules, okay? So there's been, since I was playing around with this, and since maybe you've been playing around with this, there's been some enhancements to the whole business rules service in general. As you can see here, there's a migration possibility, and there's also different releases now. And in the version 2 of the runtime API, you can also specify what release of a business rules service you want to invoke, but we'll come to that shortly. So if we look at the rules, there's no included rules. This is a new feature, or a relatively new feature. We can look at the rules, the discount rules here, which is of type decision table. Okay, so we'll go click on that. In fact, if I get rid of my bookmark bar, I have a little bit more space, and you can see that this is a decision table with a first match hit policy, and it's a really simple decision table that is in read-only mode at the moment. But this decision table is based upon the attributes of the structure flight info. So if the value of airline in the flight info structure is BA, then the discount is 2. If it's AA, then the discount is 12. If it's Lufthansa, then the discount is 11. Okay. So that's something you can maintain, and also there is a wonderful control in UI5 in the sap.rules.ui library that allows you to build applications or parts of your applications to give to your users so that they can maintain this data themselves, because we as developers or administrators, we don't own this data, the users, the business does, so we want to give them the ability to modify this as and when they see fit. This is the whole beauty of business rules. We can extract this out and get them to maintain it, right? somebody was saying, there was a conversation on Twitter, wasn't there, about what's the SM31 equivalent of, or SE16 equivalent of in S4HANA Cloud, and there isn't, of course, directly, but business rules, I think, overlaps a lot in that sort of mental space. Anyway, that's a subject for another time, maybe. What you do then is you can combine different actual rules into rule sets. Okay, so I've got a rule set just in case you've got multiple rules, multiple decision tables that you want to combine into a thing that you want to call as an individual call. I've got a rule set here that just contains that individual single rule, discount rule. So there's a little bit of hierarchy, a little bit of structure here that's, for my purposes, for this thing here, not really necessary, but you can imagine more complex rules. This is the simplest rule ever. And so that rule set, which contains that rule, is then connected to a discount rule service. Okay, and this is the deployable unit. Okay, remember when we looked last week at the APIs for business rules? There was a design time API and a runtime API, and you can sort of see, with the I think it's actually the design time. Obviously, you can read and write rules and update them and everything. But with the runtime API, you can invoke the business rule. But I think it's also the runtime API where you can make that deployment as well. So here's a discount rule service. I can't remember what we see there. Yeah, there we go. So the discount rule service collects together all the different things you define in the project and presents those as a invocable thing on the business rules service mechanism on the cloud platform. So it has basically here's the vocabulary, here's the annotations, and that's more or less it, right? And the name of the service is discount rule service. Right, so in fact, let me just go back into airline discounts again. So it can be a little bit sort of, whoa, there's a lot of things going on here for a simple rule like, what's the discount percentage of an airline? But actually, once you start to stare at this for a little bit, it starts to make a lot of sense. Let me just go back to the rule service there. If you wanted to, you could deploy that. You could have another rule service, and so on. So far, so good. Are you all still with me? You're organising meeting in the mothership. I think that's a first on the live stream. That's wonderful. Right. So there's an example of a business rule. Ooh. We've got another follower. Thank you very much. Der einzig wahre Kobold. Thank you very much for following and welcome. And thank you for subscribing as well with Twitch Prime. That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that. So with that in mind, what I want to do in the next half hour is not have a look at that rule, because we did that last week, but we're going to try and invoke that rule. Okay. So we want to be able to put in an airline and get out a percentage, okay, from the command line, okay. I think those of you who know me will know that I like to do things. Well, some people say I like to do things the hard way. I like to do things the deep and meaningful and clear way, i.e., from the bottom up. So we're going to use the command line, and we're going to use curl. I did consider using Postman. And Postman is wonderful, which is an HTTP client. It's a graphical user interface based HTTP client, which is fantastic, and a lot of people use Postman. But it does hide some of the detail that I think is important to at least know about, so that when that Postman does it for you in the background without even telling you, you're at least aware that it's doing it for you. I'm thinking specifically of the management of cookies and why they're so important and relevant when we're using cross-site request forgery tokens. Okay, that will all hopefully become clear. So I've got a terminal here, obviously, because the future, you see that? The future is terminal, just in case you didn't know. Wonderful t-shirt. In fact, no, before we want to do that, I want to have a look at the API, don't we? We want to go to api.sap.com, and we want to have a look at the business rules execution API, or the runtime API, to figure out what we need to do. I mean, I know what we need to do because I've had a look at it already, and I've got it in a little script I want to show you, but let's just make this discovery ourselves. So we're going to search for business rules. I think this is what we found last week as well. This is an API package. I'm not great with emojis or icons, but I can obviously tell that that's a package with the, with a world with 3 different things coming out of it, and that is an actual API. Okay, I guess so that makes sense. Yeah. So there's SAP Cloud Platform business rules. Okay, and we saw this last week. There are 6 APIs, and the reason there are 6 is because there's the design time and the runtime dimension. There's the Cloud Foundry and the Neo dimension. And there's also for the runtime, or as it's called here, execution, execution runtime, there's also a version 1 of the API and a version 2 of the API. I grabbed a script that I used when I was playing around with this before, and it's a version 1 script. So I thought, actually, why not? Because I think maybe some of you will also be familiar with version 1. So we'll do that first, and then we'll move to version 2. I do think, having looked at the API version 2 compared to version 1, it is cleaner from a URL namespace pattern perspective. It's cleaner, and also the payload that you send, I think, is a little bit nicer. So yeah, well done to the business rules teams for making that transition to version 2. We're going to play around with version 1. Is deprecated. It doesn't mean to say it's it's not usable. It's going to be supported for deprecation purposes until May 2020. I've read, so we'll play around with that, right? So there we go. So let's have a look. Here we go. Oh, Ulf, is it possible to extract the content from a decision table into Excel? Into Excel? What? Into Excel for working there with very large data entries and then input. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know I don't think there's a. Last time I looked, and those, e.g. Volker and John and other people who are have more recent experience with UI5, there may be some enhancements to that control in the sap.rules.ui library. I wouldn't expect that that's the case for that specific control. However, that doesn't mean to say that you can't build something yourself. I mean, it would be a little bit involved. But that's a really, really good question. So Nabheet, I also wish there was. I am also not aware. Sadly, the UI experience is not that great. Yes, yeah, exactly. Bombadil is saying you can export rules and import, but of course it does it in JSON format, which of course, can Excel read JSON? I know that Google Sheets can read JSON. You may have to write something in Excel to parse the JSON, or parse the JSON into a CSV format that Excel can then slurp in. But I don't think there's anything standard. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anything standard. Yeah, exactly. I do know it's possible in SAP PO, in the business rules manager there, but not with this. I don't think so anyway. Definitely worth putting a question on the SAP community though, in the under the business rules service tag. I definitely recommend that. Good question though. That reaction about Excel, I think people who know me will know why I reacted like that. So anyway, where were we? Looking at the rules execution API for Neo. We'll look at the version 1 first of all, because I think that's what we want to do first. Now, in the rules execution, in the runtime API, we've got these different sort of classes. Let's just sort of navigate ourselves or familiarize ourselves a little bit with the API business sort of navigation. It's got different sort of categories of API calls. If we go back and have a look at the rule authoring API, you'll see that the categories are different. You can use the API to manipulate rules, rule services, rule sets, data objects, and so on. All the things that we saw in our UI. Okay, so you can push and pull and create, read, update, delete, all these different components of a rule service or of a rules project, right? But what we want to do is we want to invoke a rule. So we need to look at the rule execution API, and note as well that I did say that when we deploy, the deploy is going to be somewhere, and the deploy and the undeploy, but also belongs to this execution API. Why not, right? What we're interested in is the invocation. Okay, so there's a single endpoint pattern, a single verb noun combination, and this tells us that with the post verb or HTTP method and this URL pattern, we can invoke a rule service. Okay, so that is our aim today. The rule service path info is v1. Now it's really nice that I think any API or IPA these days needs to sort of bear in mind versioning. So it's great that they have the version 1, because when you look at version 2, it's got /v2, which is great, so you know where you are. Rule service Java. Now I did read out on the Tech Aloud podcast a brilliant article by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web. Cool URIs don't change, and it basically said that something like this is not desirable because this sort of exposes the back-end implementation of those resources, which is, and if that changes, if suddenly they rewrite it to be, to be served by Clojure or, I don't know, Perl, then, that URL is not going to be relevant, or it's going to change. So we should hide those sorts of things, and you'll see that the version 2 does, okay? Then you have the project name, okay? Are we still there? Yeah, so the project name in this case is Airline Discounts, right? And then we have the rule service name, which in this case is Discount Rule Service. So to invoke that business rule, we need the project name, we need the rule service, we need a token, and we also need to send it the information that we need to offer. So in our case, we need to send it the value of an airline that we want the discount for. So British Airways, BA, for example. So there we go. So how many people? Let me know on the chat, and please, chat. I think it's wonderful that we're chatting. How many people are already familiar with CSRF? Cross-site request forgery. Basically, any API that you're going to find on the API business. I mean, that's a very general statement, but I think it's true. Any API that you're going to find that does something exciting, interesting, that makes changes, is protected. And by protected, I don't only mean from an authentication point of view, but also protected so that cross-site scripting attacks are prevented, or you can avoid them. So in order to call a so-called destructive or a read-write API section, you need a token. So you need to ask for a token. Basically, I've lost where I'm going now. Yeah, so in order to make a call that does something rather than just return some data, not only do you need to authenticate, but you also need to supply a token that you've requested previously, okay? There's all sorts of things you can find out on the web about cross-site request forgeries and tokens and everything and how they work, but essentially you'll find this is required for all SAP APIs here. So it's valid for the current session, and we'll see what current session means. It's mandatory in the case of basic authentication, which we're going to be using to keep things simple. I'm not going to show you my password, of course. So let's have a look at the thing we need to call first, the cross-site request forgery handling. And this is where we request a token. Okay. In fact, let's use. Oh, let me log on first of all. You can try this in the UI, and then we can actually say cross-site request forgery handling. Configure the environments. I've already configured this. If you look at one of the previous episodes, we configured this together. So I've got my trial environment, which points to my trial context. So I can hit try out. We have to pass in a header X CSRF token the fetch value. When we run it, we get a response in return, which includes in the header of the response a token. In this case, it's 01ECF, whatever, right? That token we need to then take and then use for subsequent calls to the actual invocation API, okay? And that token is valid for the current session. Now, I'm going to use that very generic phrase, and we'll see what that means shortly. Within the same session, okay? What does session mean? Well, think of cookies. Okay, so we need to call that first of all, and then we need to invoke the rule service, passing it the token that we've received, okay? We also need to specify the project name in the URL and the rule service, and then the body. As you can see here, it's just an array of records, and there's only one record here. Here's an example. You pass it the type, and the type is basically the structure. If we have a look here, the type in our case would be rule service, discount rule service. If we look at the rule set, discount rule set, the discount rule. I'm hoping it's going to show us here. No, sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. Where is it? In the rule service, there we go, discount rule service, sorry, I was already there, wasn't I? Flight info is our input structure. So here we'd have type flight info, and then we'd have, if we look at the flight info, we can see, of course, it contains, where is it? Come on, flight info. It contains the, where is it? Come on, what's going on here? Have I logged out? The flight info structure contains the airline attribute or airline field. So that here would be airline, and then we'd have the airline like Lufthansa or whatever, and that's all we need. So that's what we need to pass. So that's enough talking, and that's enough looking at web pages. Let's do some do something on the command line, because it's a lot more exciting. And I've got, rather than you watch me type all this in, and also it's already 8:43, I can't believe it. I always say that, don't I? We've got, in fact, there we go, right, a little script. Okay, and you might have seen this script. It's a slightly modified version of the thing I showed during the session that I gave at UI5Con last year. But I think it's really useful for what we want to do right now, and we're going to modify it slightly, or I have modified it slightly already. So we can see here that we've got a rule project name variable, and this is Bash scripting. So it's a shell script. It's using Bash. I'm on Mac OS, and of course with Catalina. Catalina, do not want. But with Catalina, they've moved the default shell to be the Z shell or the Z shell. But I'm sticking with the Bash shell for now because why not? So anyway, I'm defining in the Bash shell here a variable. Airline discounts is the name of the rule project, remember? And the rule service in that project is that discount rule service, the things we've been looking at, okay? I want to be able to input an airline code on the command line. Catalina is, John, you may find it great, but Catalina has been no end of issues for me. It's causing me nightmares. Anyway, let's not even go there. The airline code is something I want to pass on the command line, so I'm going to take the first parameter that's passed to this script and assign that to the airline code. My user there is because the BPM rules runtime, if we have a look back actually at the where is it? BPM rules runtime, where are we? Configure environments. We can see that the BPM rules runtime URL, I don't know why they grey this out, it's almost impossible to read. I'm going to put it on the thing there. There we go. The runtime URL looks like this, which includes, of course, the provider account BPM and the consumer account, which is my sub account here. So that's what we're dealing with here. Let's go back up here. So the BPM rules runtime URL is going to be HTTPS BPM rules runtime BPM user, which is me, i347491 trial.hanatrial.com. And then if you have a look at the API definition, you'll see that for all the different API calls in this v1 of the runtime execution API, there's a prefix of rule/service. Okay, this changes slightly when we move to V2. And I deliberately want to show this and see how it changes, so it's much nicer in V2. So the endpoint that we want to hit for any given runtime API v1 call is a combination of the rules runtime, which is this, and the runtime prefix, which is this. Okay. Oh yes, Volker, I haven't forgotten about the mob programming, a media resource cap example. Yes, I think maybe we should do that. We should think about or discuss that and think about how we can do that, because I think we'll probably need more than 1 hour. So, you know, if we can all find an afternoon somewhere and we'll just run the live stream sort of on an open-ended basis, and people can come in and go out, I think that would work really well. So thanks for reminding us about that, and let's discuss it on the Hands-on SAP Dev Slack channel, definitely. So there we go. There's the endpoint. So we're forming an endpoint variable. I'm just going to say, well, if you haven't specified an airline code, if that's sort of empty that we've supplied from there, then of course abort, right? So there we go. And then what I'm going to do is run a curl command, and you'll see the thing that we're doing in raw. Okay, so we're going to use curl, which is obviously the best HTTP client there is on the command line. I'm using netrc. So we discussed netrc last time. Netrc is a way of not having to supply your credentials for a given machine, for a given rules runtime. Let me just actually bring up here I suppose head -2. I've put here an example, and I've not got my password in it, but basically a .netrc file looks like that. So the machine, you specify the machine name, and then you specify your login name, and of course then you also specify a password, and then that is used. And this file is sort of read only to me. Then you specify password, and then curl will use the net. It's a standard. It will use that to authenticate. Okay, so that's what that netrc thing is all about. There we go. There we go. So instead of supplying, authentication here, then just like we saw in the requirements, we have to pass a fetch value for the X CSRF token header. Okay. So we passed that. So this is us requesting the token. We're saying verbose, so we can see everything that's going on. We can see the headers going out, and we can also see the headers coming back in. Okay, and we're going to capture all those headers and all the output in header data. Now, if you're wondering what this is, so basically curl outputs whatever it's retrieved, outputs the resource to standard out, but it also, if you're saying verbose, it will output all the headers that it sends and all the headers it receives in the response to standard error. So you can have a look at those as well. So I'm capturing standard error, or I'm redirecting standard error, not to a file. I was before, but that the outgoing request also includes the authorization header that's formed by curl from the netrc. And I don't want you to see the authorization header, but you can't just grep it out of the standard out, because that is not coming out of standard out, it's coming out of the standard error. So I'm using this process substitution facility. If you're not familiar with that, have a look. Let me just go to hands-on SAP Dev here. Let me go back up, bring this back up again. There we go. And there we go, episode 39, looking at process substitution. Watch the replay. It's a very short one, it's only 10 minutes. I did it on Sunday. Watch the replay, and that will explain what process substitution is all about. It's absolutely an amazingly powerful thing on the command line. So that's that. Where are we? There. Okay, so what this is saying is redirect the standard error of curl into not a file, but into a process. Okay, we're substituting a file with a process. So that's that. And what I'm doing then is, removing any lines with the word authorization in, and then finally piping that, or redirecting the output of that into the header data variable, which represents this file. Okay, so in fact, why don't we echo token and exit. Let's just make it stop there, and we'll do one thing at a time, okay? And we'll then understand what this is doing as well. Are we all still with us? All still together? So let's say invoke rule service. I'm going to press enter, and it says specify an airline code. Okay, so I'm going to invoke rule service American Airlines. Okay, so now it's given us a token. So what's happened in the background? Well, what's happened, in fact, let me just remove that one and the headers, so we can see that all we've got is a single file here. Let's just do that again. Okay, so we've got a different token this time, 48DC. But what we've got is a cookie jar, which we'll look at shortly, and we've also got the this headers.dat. Now, I'm just going to doubly make sure. No, actually, no, that's fine. That's fine. Minus v auth headers.dat. Oh, there we go. Okay, so perfect. Yeah. Okay, so this is the output. This is the output of the curl command, and we see all the with asterisk. The asterisk ones are the sort of the information from curl, but then we get down to what's sent. Okay, so these are the headers that are sent to the API endpoint. Okay, minus the authorization header, which I've grepped out. Okay, so you can't see it. So we can see that we're calling. In fact, let's just remove most of this, right? Because we want to see the there we go. So it's calling that endpoint there, BPM rules runtime BPM i347 blah 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 HANA trial on demand.com / rule service v1 rules XSRF token. Okay, if you are like me and are completely confused why we switch between XSRF and CSRF, you know, you're not alone. I don't know why it's XSRF here. In my mind, it should be CSRF because that's what it's called. I think these names are used interchangeably. Hey, Maluo5, what are the tokens decoded to? Well, the token is just is effectively an opaque string, which is then used to pass in the next call. They're not really decoded to anything. It's not an encoding of anything. It's just a unique token, almost like a UUID, that sort of thing. I hope that's what you're asking. Let me know if it's not. So these are the things that get sent, and you can see here that we're sending this fetch requirement. The control M is just carriage return. Ignore that for now. What we get in response, so we can see here as well that the greater than sign is signifying from curl. These are the things that are going out in the call, and the less than sign these are things that are coming back in the call. I think it's a wonderful way of representing those. Okay, you've only worked with JSON Web Tokens with JOTs. Yes, but the tokens here, it's a lot simpler than JSON Web Token. There's nothing inside a token that's encoded. It's literally just, it's almost like an OAuth token. Think of it like that. So there's nothing that's encrypted or encoded inside of that opaque string. It's just an opaque string. But this is where I'm glad you asked that, because this is where we get to explore what session means. What we get back is a token, that 48DC. But we also get back some cookies. Okay. Now, cut long story short, this token is only valid in the context of those cookies, which represents a session. Okay. What that means is we can't go ahead and just supply the token in the call to invoke the rule service without these cookies, because that token outside of that context is not going to be treated as valid on the server. So we have to capture these cookies and supply them in the next call. Okay, so this is the token, and if we have a quick look here, is it there? Let's look in. What we do in there is we're just doing a grep on the file, on this file here, to find this file, to find this line, XCSRF token, right? And we're using awk. If you're not familiar with awk, then I wrote a blog post on Langram earlier this week, the power and simplicity of the shell. Where's that there? Let me just paste that in. Learn more about awk there. There we go. Let's put that down again. And let me put that in the live dashboard. I'd recommend that. And we're just printing out the third field with the default field separators, which is going to be basically the token. Okay, so that's the token. So let's remove this echo and just have a look now in the last few minutes. I mean, we'll go through in more detail next time. We're authenticating again via the netrc approach. This time we're going to be invoking the main invocation rule. Let me just go back here and bring that up. Let's just remind ourselves of what that is. Okay, we're going to be invoking this. Invoke rule service, a post requests v1 rule services Java project name rule service name. Okay, so that's why we've got here the endpoint, okay, which is combined. It's the URL base and the extension, okay, which is this thing here, the rules runtime and the runtime prefix, right? And then we've got REST v1 rule services Java, which is what we've just seen. Then we specify the rule project name, which is what it's asking for. Then we specify as the final part of the path info the rule service name. But what do we pass it? If you remember, let's look at that again. If you remember, we have to pass it something that looks like this. Okay, this is a bit of JSON, the JSON payload. We've specified the project name. We know what the project name is. We know what the rule service name is. We've got a token. And what we're passing it then is this JSON here, which is all in one line, effectively the same thing as what we saw just then in that screenshot. But we're passing it the type, which is the flight info, which is the name of the structure, the input structure. And then we're passing it an airline attribute name with the value airline code, in this case AA or LH or whatever. Okay, we're passing that. We've got to specify that it's application JSON because that's what we're passing. We're passing some JSON here. But then we also have to pass the token that we've received in the first call. Okay, but that won't work if I remove this for a second. Let's put that there. Right. Let's get rid of silence. No, we'll keep that there. That's not going to work, right? Because let me just show you. Invoke. Let's just try it here. Yes, okay, oh, yeah, just invoke rule service. What's going on? I'm piping into JQ, there we go, how's that instead? Let's do that again. And what we get is a 403 forbidden. That token is not valid outside of the context of those cookies. Notice here, in the original call, we're saying any cookies you get, put them in this cookie jar, which is a file, which is a curl standard, and then we're supplying that cookie jar when we make the second call, so that those cookies are sent along with that request, with that invocation request, to contextualize the token. So now if we save that and try it again, we get the answer. In fact, let me put the JQ, sorry, there we go, and pipe it into JQ, which will pretty print for us as the default. There we go, we get discount of 12, and just to prove it, no, that was a very, very quick, but just to prove the point, if we have a look at the rule for, what was it we invoked? American Airlines. It's 12. There we go. So that's it. That went really fast. Thank you so much for joining. That was a really, really fast way of invoking, or a fast showing of invoking that rule. Let's do it really slowly next time, and then move on to version 2, and then start making our way to Cloud Foundry. Thanks so much for joining. I can't believe it's 9 o'clock already. Let me know in the comments here. The comments will stay around. If you found that useful. I enjoyed that, but where does the time go? I think as you're getting older, maybe time goes quicker or something. But thank you so much for watching, and have a great weekend.